Hello everyone, this is Quentin Figueroa with the illustrious website crowdfreedom.com, and today I wanted to talk to you about, is profit good or bad? So we hear people on kind of both sides of this. Some people say that profit is a good thing and it makes our lives better, and some people say profit's a bad thing and it's exploitive and it hurts people. So let's kind of look into that and see whether or not profit is a good or a bad thing. So if we take kind of the textbook definition of profit, it reads something like, a profit is a financial gain, especially the difference between the amount earned and the amount spent in buying, operating, or producing something. Okay, so that is kind of a dry definition, and it's kind of monetary based, and it's kind of not hitting at the core of what a profit really is, and it leaves out a lot of kind of the market pieces of a profit and the decisions that people make in regards to a profit and this kind of thing. So there's stuff missing if you just kind of look at a definition and try to get an understanding of profit from that. So if we actually look a little bit further, there's kind of another way to look at it, which is well, obviously a profit, it's basically it's getting more out of something than you put in. So it's basically like a surplus, and it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. But in most cases it is, because that's kind of what markets are based around. But let me give you kind of another definition on that. And that is, a profit is the positive difference between the total cost of production and the resulting price paid by the consumer. And so in this way of looking at it, we're talking about a consumer, because a profit involves kind of two parties. It involves multiple people, and there's a consumer on the end of every profit. So if we were to actually look at something like two people making a trade with something, then you can kind of see where the consumer fits in and kind of where the profit fits in. So if say I have an iPhone and you have $500. So let's say that I don't really value my iPhone much. I don't really like it. I would much rather have your $500. And let's say that you would much rather have my iPhone than your $500, right? So this is a type of a scenario for a trade where I value your $500 more than I value my phone, and you value my iPhone more than you value your $500. So if we were to actually do a trade here, we would both be profiting relative to kind of our subjective value. So as a consumer on both ends, when I trade my phone for your money and you trade your money for my phone, you are getting the better end of the deal and I'm getting the better end of the deal. So it's a win-win situation, which is very important to think about here, because when most people think about profit, they think about one party winning at the expense of another party losing. But that's not how it works, because any trade that happens in a free market is voluntary. You are voluntarily choosing to make that purchase or that trade or whatever it is. It's something that you are choosing to do. So you're getting your way, and when they sell it to you, they're getting their way. So both people are winning. You're getting what you want. It's not a win-lose, it's a win-win. And this is something important to think about when talking about a profit, because the consumer is winning. When a profit's made, you're actually winning, you're not losing, right? So you're getting what you want. So let's take another example. So let's say I make a chair. I'm a chair company and I manufacture chairs. And let's say when I make a chair, it costs me $50 to get parts for the chair, the wood, all that kind of stuff. It costs me $20 in labor to have somebody actually put together and build the chair, or for my own time to actually build the chair. And it costs, say, $10 in rent for a factory and a location to be able to assemble this chair. So $50, $20, $10, it costs me $80 if you add all this up, right? So all the kind of components that go into building this chair is $80. And let's say I price and decide to sell the chair at $100, right? So if somebody wants to buy this chair voluntarily, then I would be making a $20 profit. So if somebody does buy this chair for $100, what does this mean? It means a lot of different things. But to start out, it means that they are getting something that they value more than their $100. And I'm getting something more than I value than that chair that cost me $80 to make. And so if they pay $100 and it cost me $80 to make, and there's a $20 profit on my end, there's a really interesting thing out here. And that is this. That $20 is $20 of value that is added to society through this purchase. So that difference, that profit would not exist had this trade not taken place. So had I not actually put the chair together and assembled these pieces, they would be less valuable to the overall society as a whole, just by themselves, unassembled, not in use, than me putting them together in a way that somebody values it at $100, right? So they could have bought those raw components for 80 bucks, but they don't want to do that. They want to buy the end result for 100 bucks, and they value that more. They are valuing kind of all these things put together in a way where it creates a $20 of value that would have otherwise not been there. So, you know, you've heard about printing money. With a profit, you're essentially printing value through innovation. It's a really interesting thing to think about and consider. So that's what would be happening in a chair example. One sec. Okay, so if we were to actually look at another example, like for example, say you have a life-threatening disease, right? And you have this really bad disease and you're gonna die if something doesn't happen about it, and a cure currently doesn't exist. Okay, well, let's say I know chemistry, science, and I'm creative. I could come up with a way to cure this disease. It's possible. I mean, people invent different medicines all the time. So if I were to create a medicine that can cure this disease, that would be something that is extremely valuable to you. And so let's say that it costs me, it costs me, say, a lot of time and energy and whatnot to figure out how to do this, but once I know how to do it, say I can create a pill for 100 bucks and I sell it to you for 1,000 bucks. You would gladly pay $1,000 for a pill that would save your life. You know, granted you had $1,000. And this would be a $900 profit on my end. I'd be making a huge profit. But you would be making a huge profit too, because you would be able to get something that you wanted that otherwise did not exist. And because I'm able to create something that you value, I'm making a profit by doing so, right? So it's interesting, it's an interesting thing to think about, how the profit is basically bringing something that didn't otherwise exist into reality that now you value and you gladly will voluntarily spend your money for. So again, we're both voluntarily making a trade that we're both happy about. Okay, so I sell this pill for $1,000, cost me $100 to make, I make a huge profit, and we both are winning. But you say, no, you're exploiting these people, or you know, I'm exploiting you because you shouldn't have to pay this much money. I'm just being greedy by charging 1,000 bucks when I could charge like $110 and make a small profit, or I could charge straight up $100 and make no profit, and we'd still both win. So I'm being exploitive. And what about poor people who can't afford this pill? Why don't I just provide it for them? So there's two things here. First of all, this pill, had there not been a profit incentive for me to actually want to create it, it would have never existed to begin with. So we only have the pill because there is a profit that can be made. And the profit is a signal telling entrepreneurs like me that if you find a way to do this thing that people value, then you will create a profit and everybody will win. So number one, it won't be there had there not been a profit incentive. And number two, competition through markets because of profits will drive down the price anyway with time. That's kind of the nature of markets, and that's kind of the point of markets. And we see this all the time in different industries. For instance, computers. The very first computer, or the earlier computers, were the size of a room. They cost millions of dollars. They were very, very, very slow, and only extremely wealthy people could buy them. And you would say this is exploitive of poor people who don't have access to computers. But it's not, because the profit that was made by somebody creating this allowed competition to come into this market and to compete for that profit. So you have this kind of new innovation and advancement. People are profiting through it, and other people say, hey, I want to make some of this profit while it's around. So they start to charge less money for that same thing. And they start to build something better and charge kind of the same price. So you continue to have this advancement of better quality and cheaper prices through competition. And this is what Buckminster Fuller coined as ephemeralization. And that basically means you're doing more for less. So you do more and more and more for less and less and less until things become either cheap or free. And that's ephemeralization. And that is the nature of a free market, and that is what competition does. And profits drive that competition. So it's not just some arbitrary kind of random thing. It's a market signal and a piece of kind of technology, high-level organization that is more than just making money. It's signals to what consumers like you and me want to spend our money on, and it allows entrepreneurs to get these signals and know which best way to direct their energy, their creativity, their raw resources to create something that we favor as valuable. So it's a very powerful thing. And back to the computers. So computers were originally really expensive, right? $1 million for a computer the size of the room, that sucked. Now we have computers that fit in our hand. They're 1 million times faster than what we had before. And they're, you could get one for $300, $200. It's way cheaper, way better. And that is the result of a profit and a market. And that's how this works. So you're saying, what about poor people who don't have access to computers? Well, they do pretty much now. Everybody, for the most part, can get a mobile phone. They're freaking cheap. But not everybody, 50 years ago could have had a computer the size of the room for $1 million. But because of profits, the market allowed for people to come in and compete and lower the price and allow for more and more and more people to get something. And you see this kind of thing happening big time in technology and computers because guess what? It's a free market. And you don't see this in things like medicine because medicine isn't a free market. It's regulated by the government, and you're not allowed to create the products you want and sell them for the price you want and allow people to choose what they want to buy. And if they could, medicine would be super cheap, and it would work this exact same way as computers or any other market where it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, higher and higher in quality, until eventually it's either free or really cheap, and poor people for the most part can afford anything anyway, and it takes care of all this poverty and crap that people like to talk about, that these people with make profits keep people away from, which isn't true. It's government regulation and things like this that keep entrepreneurs from coming in and ephemeralizing markets. So when you think about that kind of thing, just think back to computers and how computers used to suck, but now they don't suck, and the way that it's advanced so much in such little time. And that's what happens with every market if you allow a free market. And it's interesting. So Adam Smith talks about what's called the invisible hand. And it's basically his way of describing how the market itself is like it has this like part of it, that this unforeseen thing that self-regulates on what is most important to people. So even if you have some greedy person who's only creating a product or service for selfish reasons, despite them wanting to only do this for selfish reasons, excuse me, people are still going to benefit by them pursuing their own selfish interests, because they're going to create something that people can choose to voluntarily buy or not, right? And this is kind of what the invisible hand does, is it allocates resources and energy and labor and entrepreneurs in a way where they create what is most valuable to consumers. And if consumers are not valuing what they create, or they're trying to exploit people, or they're trying to manipulate people, then consumers don't have to buy that, and then they don't make a profit, they make a loss. And if you look at the vast majority of businesses, they're not profitable, they lose. Majority of businesses never make a profit, majority of businesses fail. Even if you're making a profit, it doesn't mean you're gonna make a profit indefinitely. You might start making a loss the next year, or in 5 years when people's preferences change. So the whole profit part is dynamic and it's ever changing, and it's not fixed where you're always going to make a profit. So let's go into kind of some more examples with that. So take for instance oil. 200 years ago, oil wasn't even used for anything, it didn't even exist, right? So we didn't even know about oil until kind of somebody discovered it, came up with a way to use it in a valuable way, like energy, right, for cars and things like this. So it wasn't until there was kind of a market and a profit incentive for somebody to create and use oil in a way that made consumers happy. And as soon as this innovation came through with engines and things like this, where oil could be used this way, then all of a sudden oil became extremely valuable. And then once people start to see this kind of thing, they get upset and say, well, they're wasting this resource, or they're hurting the environment, or all these different things. But oil could be used a lot of different ways. You could use oil for a slip and slide as some lubricant. You could use it as an oil painting. There's infinite number of ways to use oil. But consumers choose the best way to use oil right now in our current paradigm is as an energy source. And that's what fossil fuels, including oil, are used for. And the pros of this by and far outweigh the cons of it, right? So we're much better living in a society that has this sustainable, reliable energy source provided by oil than we are not having it. There's going to be a lot less hospitals that have energy. There's going to be a lot more problems when you don't have energy through fossil fuels. Yeah, it might not be the ideal situation, but that's what profits are all about. Because now, the oil companies are not going to exist forever. As soon as somebody comes up with a way to do energy in a better, cheaper, more profitable way than is being done now with oil, then consumers are going to shift over to that new way. And probably 50 years from now, that is going to happen, and we're not going to be using oil for energy anymore. We're going to have some other cleaner, better way. And that's all due to profits and the incentive for people to continue to outdo and outcompete and out-provide the value consumers want. That's what a market freaking does. You are aligning resources, energy, creativity in a way to create the best thing for the consumer at the cheapest price. And it continues to happen. Again, what will happen with oil is what has happened with computers, as long as the government doesn't interfere, which of course they do. But that's what happens. So, the consumers are basically directing where resources should be used, right? So when people buy oil, they are saying this oil is best used for this purpose. If it was better for their purpose, then they would buy it to be used for that other purpose. If it doesn't make sense for oil to be used for energy, people wouldn't buy it at all, and oil would make a loss. So the market and the profit mechanism tell you where to direct and put these resources rather than just some arbitrary dictate of an opinion or a government or a person that is based not on market signals, which represent everybody, but just based on some random opinion. It doesn't make sense. You want to take everybody's choices and values into account in the best way possible, and that's what the market does through the profit and loss mechanism. So if you look at something like a car is made out of, steel, iron, rubber, all these different materials and resources, and it includes labor and things like this that go into producing it. And this material could obviously be used for a vast number of other things. But people prefer having these allocated into a car because having a car is what people subjectively value as the best use of those resources when they purchase a car and when they interact with that company and that company makes a profit doing it. And of course, that car company might at some point start making a loss and no longer making a profit, which could mean a few different things. One, it might mean that a competitor is better using those resources than them to create cars that people want, and they're losing money because people can get the same thing cheaper, which means another competitor is allocating those resources and more efficiently making use of scarce resources. They're doing it better. They're better allocating them. They have less waste. It's just better. But another thing could be, if a car company starts making a loss, is maybe cars in general are no longer used. Maybe if we were to start having some type of self-driving car or some other transportation industry arise, cars in general may become less favorable. So people aren't going to buy cars, and those car companies are now going to take a loss, which is going to free up the resources that were being used for those cars to be used in the next best way, or even a better way. Resources are totally based around profit and what consumers choose. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across. And that's kind of the altruistic, humanitarian way that a free market works. It's beyond just a monetary, dry, selfish thing. There's this huge, like Adam Smith talks about, this invisible hand, this technology that drives all of this, that makes it work so flawlessly. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you. Right? So when you're an entrepreneur, you profit basically by seeing the future better than someone else. Right? So, and it has to be on something that actually is not obvious, right? And we kind of know this when people innovate and they think kind of outside the box and they're kind of outside of the normal status quo. A lot of times you'll get something really interesting. Like if you have somebody say something obvious like, it's going to be cold in winter, so I'm going to create jackets for people to stay warm. Everybody knows this, and you're not going to make a profit because you're not doing something new or valuable or something that isn't already being done. And that's what this profit is telling you. It's already being done. Nobody cares. People get it. But 10 years ago, before we had an iPhone, and Apple and Steve Jobs came around and said, we can create a phone so good for people that they are going to want to do anything they can to get it, and it's going to be so valuable to them that it's going to be worth them putting their money into it. We're going to make people's lives better, and we can predict, we're so certain that they're going to want this, that we're going to create it. And yeah, there may be other people, other companies that were thinking the same thing, but Steve Jobs and his company were the ones that actually did it, and they did it successfully, and they made a huge killing and a huge profit by doing this because they accurately predicted the future in a way that was not obvious to other people, or at least in a way where they completed it where others couldn't complete it, because it's not easy to do things. You have to actually find ways to solve problems, organize people, convince people with resources to give them to you to create this future thing. You have to sell people. There's a lot that goes into making a business work and predicting a future and creating that future in a tangible, actionable way. And that's what Steve Jobs and Apple were really good at. And that's why they killed it with the iPhone and are one of, if not the largest company in the world right now. So, but of course, once they did this, you have other companies like Android, Samsung, and other companies that then start to come in. They see that there's a good profit, that they did something new that people want. The profit brings them in to now start getting a piece of that action. And by doing that, they make better quality phones, and they drive down the price of those phones for people. That's ephemeralization. That's what markets do. That's what the profit signal does for markets. So you have this whole kind of process happening because one entrepreneur or a group of people kind of foresee the future, and they have this profit incentive to create that, and then they do it, and they end up doing well, and then eventually other people come in and take away that profit, and then so now they're going to have to come up with the next thing, or somebody is going to have to foresee the future in another way, and it's not going to be obvious, and it never is, and it's hard to predict the future, and that's why nobody or very few people start businesses, because they know this. So they'd just rather complain about businesses that do foresee the future and make money rather than actually creating the future themselves, because they don't want to do it because it takes work, it's hard, and all these other things. So yeah, it's very, very, very altruistic to make a profit. It's humanitarian. It's what people are wanting, and you're doing that. So let's look at this other piece. A profit doesn't have to be just monetary. Like we talked about before, it's basically a surplus. It's where you are getting more output than input. You are getting more out of the pieces that you put in, right? So, and it doesn't have to be monetary. So if I create a song and I'm a musician, I can kind of put together notes, sounds, tones, and things like this, and put all these pieces together and then output a song that people like. Now, money is basically energy, right? So in order to get money, people exchange their labor and their time and things like this for money. And then this money is later used for something else, right? So you exchange your time and labor to create money, to get money. This money is stored, it's a storage of energy, and then it's later used again to bring something to you that you want. So say like if you were to buy a album, you work a few hours, make 15, 20 bucks. That $20 is energy that you spent time working for, and then you take that money and then you exchange it for an album that somebody created, right? So if you take money away from what's happening here, all that's happening is you're exchanging labor and time, energy, for somebody else's energy, right? It's an energy exchange. We're not talking money, we're talking energy. And we're talking kind of exchanges of value that people provide. I provide labor, that's value. Somebody provides music, that's value to me. And you're exchanging value. So it doesn't even have to be monetary. And if I'm listening to somebody's music, I don't have to pay for it for them to get a profit. If I listen to it, and to them, they are happy because they're seeing the enjoyment that I have, they're getting like an ego boost, or they're getting approval that what they're doing is making others happy. To them, that's a profit. And it's not monetary, it's just, but it's still the same thing as what a monetary profit would be, because it's just energy. They're getting my energy in the form of my appreciation and me sharing it with other people and all these things. They're getting that. And it's just really interesting to think about. And so yeah, monetary is just one way to profit, but it could be a psychological profit. It could be some type of egotistical profit. It could be the admiration of others. It's just that energy flow into you, and that surplus that's being created because of it. That value that is being created that otherwise would not create, because of the components being assembled in a way to create something that people want. So it's like a surgeon. A profit is like a surgeon saving too many lives, right? So if you're going to complain about somebody making a profit, then you have to complain about a surgeon saving too many lives. If you're going to complain about somebody making a profit, then you're going to have to complain about a musician making too many songs, right? You can't get mad about people creating a surplus or creating more with the pieces that they have. That's innovation, that's creativity, that's advancement. You can't be mad about that. So is a profit a good or bad thing? Well, I ask you, is a surgeon saving too many lives a bad thing? Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and have a spectacular day.